Professionally in the business, being a woman was still quite new, and was a disadvantage for getting the promotions. Edie Lederer and a few others were the pioneers in that, but very few people for that. So it was an impediment in terms of climbing the internal ladder in that. But in terms of interviewing and succeeding in the interviews that you could do, I found it an advantage. It was, I guess, easier to make a connection, to get past the barriers when you're doing an interview, and to make it more, make them more comfortable. For the most part, I wanted to go overseas, and the bosses, the managers for UPI pat me on the knee and say, oh no, you couldn't come to work down here because the Latin men would fight over you. But it's your fault that they won't behave. I mean, so once again, the gender gap was really a sex gap. But this was like 65, late 60s. They were like a year, 2 years ahead of whatever the big issue was going to be. Like we had Marian Wright Edelman from the Children's Defense Fund, Education Defense Fund, Marian Wright Edelman, who was the most famous child expert, came and spoke 2 years before the, quote, official Year of the Child. So it was to help journalists understand in advance issues, details, and both an overview of how to understand issues, but it was also the details and the policy making and things that we were going to be covering. But we were like JAWS was greatly ahead of the curve on all the topics in the programs. And it was everything from the right-wing militias. We had time in Montana, and Julie Dunlap and our program chairs, and we had the right-wing militias, right next door, but it was one of the topics that we had, one of the speakers we had. The big things with that Kathy Bunk set up for Beijing when it was the year of the International Year of the Women, and Hillary Clinton and the others were in Beijing. Well, we had a live feed from that at JAWS, so we were part of that whole international solidarity, but also exploring, naming what the issues were. Not only looking for solutions, but just identifying what the issues are. And that was what JAWS did to a large degree, was help us sort out as journalists what we were going to be covering and why we needed to cover certain things and how to cover it, how best to cover it, because it was not just, skimming the top, skimming the surface things. It was, and that was the big reward from it.